voices of Australians, but they're singing an old German song. Here are third and fourth generation descendants of German migrants from Bavaria, from Silesia, from Prussia, who came to this country in the 1840s and 50s. Refugees from religious persecution and forced recruitment in the German armies of the time. Great-grandfather, grandfather, father and son. They have stamped this Australian valley in the hills near Adelaide, 16 miles long and 8 miles wide, with an individuality in architecture, in speech, in name and in custom. A national imprint so firm that it's unmatched, I think, by any of Australia's migrations from Europe. It is totally unlike anything else in the country. The Barossa Valley has three main towns, Anguston, Muriutpa and Tanunda, and this is the Langmile Lutheran Church in Tanunda. And here in the churchyard and outlines of cypress trees and the church itself is the starkness and severity and discipline and character of Martin Luther's faith. In churchyards like this all over the valley, you find the story of the Lutheran migration to the Barossa. The first settlers were German families who came here with Pastor Carville 120 years ago. And they share this ground with their first leader and others like him. It is rare to find a tombstone in English until the present generation. The Lutheran Church was the first great power in the valley. The pastors were literate when their people were mainly peasants, and perhaps only the pastors could understand the doctrinal differences which provoked the migration. The church and the pastors are still the dominant force in the Barossa Valley, where 30 churches dot the valley, and where the older people particularly still expect some of their services in German.
Im Namen Gottes des Vaters, des Sohnes und des Heiligen Geistes. Wir singen miteinander aus dem Liede 698 im großen Gesangbuch, 174 im kleinen. Wir singen die ersten 3 Verse.
In the Lutheran Church of Emmanuel at Light Pass, the pastor is Pastor George Ventz. Well, there are a very great number of churches here in the valley. You see the church spires everywhere. How does it manage to support all of them?
Well, because I suppose while you see such a great number of churches, you also see a great number of people who are church people and who attend services and by their direct giving support those churches, maintain them. It's all a matter of direct giving.
Is it true that pretty nearly everybody goes to church here on Sundays?
A very large percentage of people, yes.
Pastor, you were preaching in German. What kind of German is spoken here in the Barossa Valley?
The German that is spoken here, generally speaking, would be rather perhaps a degenerate form due to the fact that there has been no cultural contact as far as most of the local people are concerned with Germany for more than 100 years.
How much German is spoken among them?
There is still quite an amount spoken among older people. There are quite a number of them seem to feel that German is the language which speaks from the heart to the heart.
I've heard it said, though, that some of them would not come to church if there weren't German church services.
That has been the tendency. It is gradually breaking down.
What about the young people? Do they speak and understand it too?
Most young people in this area would still understand it.
How has the Barossa Valley maintained its exclusiveness? Everywhere there are German names. You see very few English names. How has it managed to do that all these years?
Well, that's rather difficult to answer. I imagine that it was because of the fact that, first of all, a very self-sufficient colony of Germans came here in the early days and simply maintained themselves, and that was that. And they entered into all fields of activity, business, professions, and so on, and they supplied all of their own requirements, and there was actually no need for any intrusion from outside.
But it would seem, though, that there's been some conscious attempt to keep it exclusive. Would you agree with that?
Well, I don't know. Possibly the effect of 2 world wars may have had something to do with that. The fact that they were forced upon themselves, as it were, and made to feel that somehow they were different from other people.
Now, it's certainly true in France that the mere nature of the wine-growing industry as such has a great deal of alcoholism attached to it. Do you find that here as well?
There is a certain amount of alcoholism, but not as much as one could possibly expect under the circumstances. I will say this, that there is a great deal of wine used in the homes by, well, most people here in the Barossa Valley would probably have wine in their homes.
100 yards up the road from Pastor Vence's Church of Emmanuel stands the Church of the Straight Gate, another Lutheran church. Its famous quotations from St. Matthew and its new architecture represent at the same time the faith itself and the change that is overtaking the valley. Its pastor was born on the Birdsville track, one of 14 sons of a Lutheran missionary. Pastor Reuter's memories span many years among the people of the Barossa. His influence has been great. His new church cost £34,000, all given by his congregation of 500 people. All without the help of a ball or a raffle. I told them to give, he said, and they gave. Pastor, I heard a story. There are 2 churches here. One of them is yours, and another one is only 100 yards away. Yes. 2 Lutheran churches. And I heard a story about a man on his deathbed here who hadn't been inside the other one because of a deep and bitter rift which happened years and years ago here. Now, what was that? Why was that rift?
There were different synods right in the valley here, within a radius of about 10 miles. There were 3 different synods, Lutheran synods, represented in the various congregations.
Why was there so much bitterness between them?
That is due to them being Germans, I think. You know, German. He's got a head of his own. And if there's any family feud or anything like that, they'll very soon split up. And it has the effect on social life, church life, and so on. Build another opposition congregation. New church.
I've also heard it said that there are a second and perhaps even third generation Australians here of German descent whose tongue is German and who find it very hard to speak English. Is that true?
Certain class, yes. Not too many today. That 3rd generation, did you say? Not so much. Not so much. You'll find it here and there.
There are some, though, who really can't speak English or find it hard to.
Very few. Very few. I have one family I know where the father, he speaks very broken English, and he even was a counsellor.
As he was born and educated here.
Oh, yes, yes.
Pastor, what were things like when you first came here?
26 years ago? Pretty well the same as it is now. Pretty well the same. But I remember when I was a little boy, I used to come down here, and the people had a few acres of land. This road down here was one house next to the other, practically.
Mm.
People used to cut their crops down with a sickle, then tie it in bundles and so on.
It's said that the older pastors, perhaps particularly, had great power over people here.
I agree.
How were you able to exercise it?
They had the backing of the old people too.
Mm.
That is the thing.
Have you got as much power today over the younger people?
Not to the same extent. No.
In fact, they don't learn German anymore, do they?
No.
Do you regret that?
Well, they should know it as a language. Definitely.
And do any of them know it as a language today?
Very few. Probably.
And they're leaving the valley too, aren't they? A lot of them?
Oh, yes.
Why do you think they are?
The valley can hardly, well, it could hold them actually, but some of them get a bit vandalistic, you know.
Vandalistic, yeah. Wanderlust.
Yes. And others again, they go in different trades and so on, and there isn't enough room here for that.
Do you slip into using German yourself among these people as easily as you did just then with me?
Yes. It can easily be done.
What are the German traditions which the people here are most keen to preserve, even though they're Australians of German descent?
They were very strong on the language for a long time. They wanted to retain their German until, as I say, they switched over more or less suddenly. But,
what caused that?
well, I would say war.
How were you regarded by people during the war?
The people around here were treated as Germans.
When you've heard the bells ring out across this valley from the Lutheran steeples of the churches, you've heard one of the loveliest sounds this country has to offer. There are places here of rare and tranquil beauty. In winter now, the grass is green, cut by winding country roads of clay, and the bare vines march away across the fields in serried rows. The afternoon sun glints on silver steeples. There are no Australian towns like these villages, and there are few Australians like these Australians. Like Father Baum. He's an Australian, and so was his father. He was educated in an Australian school, but like most people in the valley, he still speaks with a German accent. Your family was poor, was it?
Very poor.
Why was that?
Well, I tell you, you can guess for yourself then. The mother, you see, she had to look after for herself. The father didn't take care of us. Mother was 2 months dead before he come to know she was dead. Now I tell you.
When you were at school, did you learn German when you were at school?
There was no English, not a word English. When I come to, when my mother died and we were part of my auntie and cousin, they took me in Kapanda as long as could they find a place for us, you know.
Now, a lot of money is made out of growing wine here.
Oh, yes.
Who makes the money out of it?
I don't think not the one who drinks it.
Old Father Baum's wife has been a worker all her life, like her husband. What kind of a life do the young people lead here today compared with the life you had when you were a girl?
Oh, I reckon they got heaven on earth, what we used to have when we were young like that. I worked hard, like from 5 o'clock in the morning till late at night.
Did you get paid for it?
Hmm?
Did you get paid for it?
Oh, 7 shilling a week.
Your father was born here, you were born here, and
Yes.
both of you went to school here.
Yes.
Do you speak mostly German among yourselves now, or English?
When we are on our own here, but when I get outside, anyone comes to the door, I generally forget the German, I'm all English.
But at home you speak German.
When we are on our own here, the two together.
The Barossa Valley was founded on wine. The first vines were planted here in 1847 and flourished in the shelter of the hills. Today, the Barossa produces half the wine made in Australia, but has lost its position as the prime grower of wine grapes to the River Murray districts. But part of the Murray grape harvest comes here for processing. Some growers told us that only about a third of them in the valley could make a full-time living from the growing of wine grapes, and most incomes are supplemented now by mixed farming. The producers of wine range from the very large firms and their huge chateaux down to the small family producers who make wine as their grandfathers did and for whom there's a growing place in the Australian market. The wine industry is leaving behind it the time when it mainly mass-produced sweet fortified wines, which gained for it among some those dubious appellations, Bombo, Plonk and Fourpenny Dark. As Australians more and more seek wines to drink as a beverage, they provide a challenge which the big producers are meeting and which has given new life to the small producer, who's concentrated on table wines. In the cellars of the wineries of the Barossa, life has a continuity and a tradition virtually unknown in the cities. Cyril Henschke lives and works among casks laid down by his grandfather, which he owns today, and some of the wine in them has been lying here since he was a boy. Mr. Henschke, you and your family have been in this valley on this same property for 100 years now, but you're still small operators. How do you manage to stay in business against the big families who seem to control the industry here in the Barossa Valley?
One of the main reasons for doing that is because we're faced with two alternatives. One is to undersell on a cheap market the larger operators, and the other one is to make a better product and to compete on an equitable basis. I think that...
Which alternative have you chosen?
Well, we've chosen to endeavour to make a better product.
Will there be more like you, do you think?
I think that there must be.
At the opposite end of the scale stand the great bottling plants of the big producers, looming over the vineyards and dominating the rolling landscape. This winery is owned by the descendants of Johann Gramp, the first man to plant vines in the Barossa. Today, it can store 4 million gallons in its vats and produces wines of all kinds at the rate of 1.25 million gallons a year, and that's nearly 10 million bottles. Just after the war, its production was 92% fortified wines and only 8% table wines. Today, its table wine production is up to nearly 40%. And that is the story of the change and the challenge to the big producers in the Barossa Valley. Here, the handful of families who dominate the winemaking industry appear to have been slow to appreciate the change in Australian wine-drinking habits. Other areas, like the Hunter River, are now better known for their table wines. But for producers like Colin Gramp, descendant of the founder of the Barossa industry, the future still looks good. Mr. Gramp, your great-grandfather founded the wine-growing industry here in the Barossa Valley. What do you see as its future?
Well, I still see a very bright future for the Barossa Valley and, of course, the wine industry. I think we all realise that the market does get difficult at times, and we realise at present that there's a chance that we may lose our 1 million gallons export to the United Kingdom.
It's because of the common market, is it?
That's right,
Does
yes.
this cause you very much concern? Is it critical?
Well, it is concerning the industry, but I think we all realise that there is a very bright future for wines here in Australia. The younger generation, and I would say the migrants, who particularly come from the continent, have helped the Australian public to realise that table wines are the wines to consume.
In fact, the whole basis of production here in the valley has changed, hasn't it, from table wines, or
Yes.
from fortified wines to table wines. How do other Germans find the people of the Barossa? Gunter Prass, a technical expert and a migrant, responsible for some at least of the new look in technique in the Barossa, is a cellar master and winemaker from Germany, Gunther, coming from a wine-making family yourself in Germany to a wine-making valley in Australia with people of German descent, how did you find it when you came here?
Oh, I felt at home straight away, I should say.
What sort of German is spoken here among the people?
Actually, the German which is spoken here is very good, but as far as grammar is concerned, I feel it goes back up to 1900.
The change in the wine industry reflects a change which is coming over the whole Barossa Valley. The outside world is breaking into its tight seclusion. The young people here find little to keep them. The austere way of life, allied with an unwillingness to go on accepting the old family relationships and dominations. The people themselves are less anxious to preserve their German traditions. In 2 wars, here they were made to feel like aliens, and they deeply resent this. While there were a very few Nazi supporters among them, the war memorials are covered with the names of those who fought against Germany, against the Kaiser, and against Hitler, and for Australia. It would be a great pity if the traditions of the Barossa were to die out. In a vast continent, often accused of being the same and uniform to the point of boredom, this valley is uniquely different. It is one of the most remarkable communities in the country. And there are forces at work among them, though, which can help to preserve a unique culture. One of them is the choir, the Liedertafel, where men come to sing for pleasure and for company, and have done so once a week for nearly a century. 3rd and 4th generation Australians singing Heimat, homeland, a homeland that they have never seen.